All right, guys, we got a new section to the America Happens website called the Whistleblowers Forum, where you could go on there and anonymously or using your name post anything that you want and contact other whistleblowers to talk about what's really going on out there. All right, so we're here with the second part of this interview. How you doing, sir?
Good. Thanks for having me, Ben.
Yeah. We've been talking, in part one, we did a deep dive into QPQ, right? It's called QPQ.
QPQ. Yeah. So quid pro quo, this for that, the old Latin phrase. So that's what the company in Switzerland is called, QPQ AG. We built the Gajimaru. The Gajimaru is the blockchain that I was describing, an actual blockchain that actually works, minting real money that really works. You might ask why it's called the Gajimaru. So Craig Everett, our chief product officer, the guy who's the former US Special Forces operator, he lives over in Okinawa. He's married to a Japanese lady. He was based over there with the, I forget the unit, but he was over there with the US Special Forces. And we were trying to figure out a way of describing something, because everything in the world is about trust markets. Your household is a trust market. Your group of friends is a trust market. Certain people you know are better at different things, and you'll give them trust that they have information that you don't, or that they're a good person, etc. How we operate in different places and different contexts is all a different type of trust market. And what I mean by that is this, and again, there's videos about trust markets on our YouTube channel, QPQ _ Internet of Economics. And we talk about this issue at some length in there. So what's happened in the so-called blockchain distributed ledger world is that you've had all these so-called layer ones, which are all controlled infrastructure. They're not real blockchains. And they all come out with, well, our use case is this. We are specialists for this particular industry. And what they're saying is that the balancing act between security, decentralization, and speed has been skewed in a certain way for specific actors to operate within. So let's say if you had 5 people who all know each other acting as a decentralized system, it's not very decentralized, but those 5 people all knowing each other might trust one person to vote on behalf of everybody else on certain issues, and another person to vote on behalf of others on issues. It's called pirate democracy, actually. There's a pirate party in Iceland driving that very agenda. In other markets, you might want the 100 people in a room to all agree, if you were to trust that something that happened in that room is true and act upon it as if it is a truth. So what you end up with is there is no one ring to rule them all. There's no one answer to every problem. However you look at anything in life, there are different compromises, and this is true in blockchain as well. The compromises between security, decentralization, and speed. The so-called blockchain trilemma. So our answer was not to say that we have one solution. Our answer was to say, well, hold on, there's tons of infrastructure being controlled solution sets, like, for example, Hedera Hashgraph is infrastructure, really good infrastructure, but it's infrastructure. That means it's not a resource layer, it's not open, it has control functions and features within it. Algorand the same. Ethereum very much the same. The only actual blockchain out there of any significance is Bitcoin, but it doesn't actually work because A, it's way too inefficient, and B, it doesn't have smart contracts, which we were covering earlier, being like vending machine chains of logic chains. So when you look at how do you create a solution set, all kinds of different requirements come into play. And our key idea was we will build this resource layer that's missing in the global economy today, missing in the blockchain world today, the absence of which allows people to control access to and between the fragmented infrastructure that is our current economic system and is the blockchain ecosystem as well. We'll build that missing resource layer first. But then we will put in place the tooling for everybody to build whatever infrastructure they want. So, for example, the Central Bank, the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, might want one solution for creating a national banking system. The US Federal Reserve and federal boards may decide that actually they'd like another type of solution. Everybody can build whatever they want. It's an open system, but we're going to put all of the tooling there that allows people to do anything they want in this way. So it's a single organism, but it can have millions of different facets. And we were trying to think that what is our object? Our object is the economic emancipation of humanity. We don't want something that's all glitzy, flashing lights and lightning and trash like that. It needs to actually be really rooted in nature. And we were trying to think of something. The obvious one was mycelium, mushrooms, because actually when you look at a mushroom, it's actually just a sexual organ that pokes up above the ground. The organism itself is mostly subterranean. In America, you've got one that I think is about 20 kilometers long, 20 square kilometers in size. Huge. But people don't tend to think very well of mushrooms. So we were still struggling with the idea. And then Craig looked out his window and said, what about the gajumaru? So the gajumaru is a Japanese tree that grows in such a way that it has a common root resource layer, which we call Groot in gajumaru, a common resource layer, a common root that then supports the growth of hundreds of trees. If you look at a fully mature gajumaru, it looks like a forest, but actually it's a single organism. So each new trunk, like infrastructure, comes out from that root. It then enables all of the branches and the leaves that make it look like an individual tree, but it's not. It's a combined open ecosystem underneath. It's the root is the same. It's the same organism. So that's why we call it the gajumaru. The idea is exactly this for the whole system to exist and to evolve, that we're not telling everybody there is one answer. We're saying we need a common open backbone that nobody owns or controls, but then enables total interoperability and interconnectivity between all of those infrastructural pieces. And all of a sudden, we have a global economy, and that actually means something.
I know this is going to be probably toughest question to answer, but how do you explain this to somebody in one sentence? Like if you want to get somebody's attention, a consumer or somebody that's going to do doing the mining on their computer, how do you explain it? Is it like be the bank? Is it that, I wrote some things down. I mean, let me throw these out at you to see if any of these, resonate, right? So it seems like if it's centralized, you're basically a serf. You're under somebody's control. You're a serf or a slave of some kind if it's centralized.
You're a subject.
You're a subject. There seems to be a be the bank element to this.
Yeah. So just that's a really important distinction, by the way. A British citizen doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I talked in the previous session about how America evolved out of Britain, that it was the people who believed in the capitalist libertarian ideal who went from Britain to America, founded the 13 colonies, and then led the Civil War against the English to remove their control. As an American, you are a citizen of America. If you have a British passport, you are a subject of the Crown. It's a very important distinction. And the truth of it is, unless and until you have your economic emancipation, your citizenship is illusory, because the state can turn on or off your access to your money, your data, and your assets.
So is be the bank the best way to kind of, the simplest way, one sentence? I mean, is that the start of this idea?
I wish I knew the answer to that question, because if I did, it would make my life so much easier. Half the problem I have is that I've been doing this for 24 years. For me, for example, I use all kinds of shortcuts when I'm talking with the team. They use them with me. So we talk about trusted money versus untrusted money. That doesn't mean anything to most people. And I didn't realize that until one of our investors turned around and said, "What the hell do you mean by trusted money?" And I thought, hold on, you're the former COO of a bank. How can you not know that? And it dawned upon me that actually, like in many industries, people use shortcut language that can mean a whole myriad of things, and they assume that everyone else knows what they're talking about, and they don't. And it's really hard when you've had your nose right up against the forest, against the tree to see the forest. Be the bank? No, probably not really, because what did banking evolve from? Banking evolved. So in the era of the Roman Empire, we had the ability to trade because we trusted the Roman system, the consuls, the tribunes, etc. The people who controlled the economy essentially provided a trust seal stamp, and this is true of the Byzants and all the different empires of the ancient eras. After the fall of Rome, certainly in a Western context, the church took over that role of intermediation, being the trusted party that sat in between the transactions between people, and certainly where those people were from different villages, tribes, etc. Around the 15th, 16th century, we saw the emergence of banks. The Templars arguably were the first banks in a way, because they gave you the capacity to move money from, let's say, France or England to the Holy Land, and to have that protected all the way along. They provided the guarantee that what you gave them at one end, less their fee, would end up at the other. And they provided security for those deposits in Jerusalem and along the way as well. But Florence, the Medicis, etc., these were the first true bankers. And what they did was they collated people's money, and they then lent that money to other people who needed it for various purposes. It went far beyond that. I mean, those are back in the days of what's called narrow banking. Narrow banking means you have $100 in your bank, you can lend $100 to other people. In fact, you probably can't. You can probably only lend about 80, because you've got to facilitate short-term usage and money coming in and out every day as people take some out and some people deposit some. But let's say in a narrow banking model, you can lend 60 to 80% of what you have out to people in order to do other things. It means that you're going to be very careful who you lend that money to. But in a broad-based banking system, or fractional banking system actually, what can happen is the bank can have, let's say, $100 on deposit, and it can lend $1,000 to all these different people. And that way they make outsized profits. And if 20% of those bets go wrong, it's okay, because they've made so much money from the other 800 that all is good in the world. That's fractional banking. And of course, when that goes very wrong, as we saw with the global financial crisis, what then happens is central banks come in and start adding zeros to the number of dollars in circulation in order to refinance all of those lenders in the system, all of those banks in the system. And by the way, it's not just banks that get that wrong. A lot of what happened in the 2008 financial crisis actually was driven by policy from the Clintons. So they created Fannie Mac, and Freddie Mac, and they tried to push this agenda of lending money to people without any real sense of responsibility for who they were lending to. I mean, this is what we talked about earlier when I said that in Europe, there's a failure to understand the duality of risk between the borrower and the lender. They just see the borrower as being the bad guy. In America, because you're a more capitalist system, you see both pieces of risk. But in the inverse to what was happening in Europe, America, basically through Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, decided that the best thing was to give people money to buy their houses and fuel the economy in that way, without having any real responsibility, because nobody was really looking at whether they could pay it back or not. They were starting to blend good debts with bad debts for credit scoring. All of these kind of things were going on, and probity and prudence went out the window. And so we had jingle mail, and the entire system collapsed in on itself. And this is what we saw: massive amounts of money printing to refloat the economy. And here we are. Sorry, forgive me. I've forgotten the question.
So, okay, I'm going to throw another one at you, because as you're talking,
I'm sorry. You were saying be the bank.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
why are we not going to say we're being the bank? Because the role of the bank has never been about this in that same way. So, It's more like be free, throw off the shackles of slavery, be emancipated. And we struggle with this because on the qpq.swiss website, we actually had a version that started telling the truth. And it said, your lives have been debased. Your work has been devalued. You have been enslaved, and it's been hidden from you. I can prove that all of those statements are true. However, they're very negative. So we tried to flip them into a more positive way and express it in a sense that actually was more about hope and saying, well, look, things could be better. This is how we could make them better. I think that part about throwing off the shackles of slavery, about emancipation, about restoring the value of your work to you, restoring agency to you, they should all, from my perspective, resonate. But the problem, as I say that, is from my perspective. My perspective is a strange one. I've been doing this for a very long time. I've seen this problem for a very long time. I've been working to solve this. So to some extent, it's a little bit like the choir master telling himself he does a great job teaching the choir how to sing. I don't know. I wish I did know. I wish I could find that simple thing that people could immediately grasp that didn't make them feel bad about themselves, but rather made them feel like we've given them an opportunity to seize their part in the future.
How about I wrote this down while you were talking. Crowdsource creation of wealth.
It's not about creation of wealth either. It's about, see, that's kind of the crypto narrative, is do this and get rich. I'm not going to sit here and tell you you'll get rich out of this. You might do, but it's not what I'm going to tell people. This is about creating a human economy. You just got rid of the anti-human administration in the Biden administration, the World Bank, World Economic Forum. You watch me talking from Davos, and I call them out for lying with my dark MAGA hat on, for saying on the one hand that we have to freeze people. Most of Europe is now in energy poverty. Most of Europe's big businesses are grinding to a halt with 3-day weeks because they can't afford to pay the electricity bills in order to pursue the net zero lunacy. At the same time, they were telling us that large language models and AI, which, by the way, are a means of taking all of our data and monetizing it for other people's purposes, all of our intellectual property and monetizing it for other people's purposes, especially when they can sell it back to us as a subscription for $20 a month to use ChatGPT, winner, winner, chicken dinner from their perspective. All of that is great. They are turning on new nuclear power stations to fuel these massive new server farms. They're diverting entire rivers to cool them. That's all okay, because large language models are the ultimate corporatist, socialist, totalitarian cabal state tool. But God forbid that you would mine real money, because that's emancipation. And that's what I was calling out in Davos. So it's not about saying that this is a quick or fast route to wealth. It's literally about saying this is about the deposition of the anti-human economy, the one that's made us all weaker, that has, we human beings, we are the inefficient cogs in their machine. The Matrix was not entirely out of, the ideas around it didn't come out of thin air. I have this argument with my daughter. She actually thinks we are in the Matrix. And I keep telling her, no, we're not. But I can see why you'd think that. In fact, I can see why your entire generation would think that, because our parents' generation and our generation sold them down the river. But it really is about understanding that our current economy does not serve people. It serves the state. It serves big corporations, but it doesn't serve us as people. So we want to give people a choice. Do you want to keep feeding that beast? Or do you want to do something that creates a human economy? One that serves us all, that nobody owns, nobody controls, but everybody can access. I don't know how to make that more attractive to somebody, because I would think to anybody who values their work, their lives, that's got to be attractive. Because right now, the transmission fluid between massive money printing and CPI, Consumer Price Index, and PPI, Producer Price Index, coming up, the transmission fluid for that are human beings. Our work has been devalued. Our lives have been devalued. We have been enslaved. These are truths.
There's concepts we've talked about, by the way, like on this Blood Money podcast that I love to bring up now because, by the way, viewers, this is something really unique we're doing right here because this started off as understanding what Greg has been working on in this fantastic new system and software he has in place. And now we're trying to figure out, how do you convey this to the people? How do you communicate to the people? Because, Greg, you're a 160 IQ guy. A lot of us aren't. You know what I mean? And I think finding the simplest way of communicating this, one of the things that resonated to me in terms of an attention-grabbing statement is the financial emancipation of humanity.
Economic emancipation.
Economic.
Financial is narrow.
Economic, yeah. Economic emancipation of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
Can I give you another exercise?
Well, let me read out what we put on the website
Sure.
in the final version. So we talked about why, how, what, who, right? And we said why. Every human being is worth more. We all deserve more. Our current economic systems are archaic. They don't serve us, the people. It's time to change this. Our life's work has been to create an alternative. Hope. How? We're deploying an actual blockchain that actually works. We're putting the currency back into crypto. It's a starting point, not an end. What? A distributed economic model that actually works for everyone, that nobody owns or controls. We call it the Internet of Economics. Who? You, us, everyone, everywhere. Together, we can restore the value of your life, your work, your future. Let's roll. Now that kind of shows our age as well, because Let's Roll is only really relevant to people who were around in 9/11.
Yeah. Well, we could bring that back, but so meme coins are the fatal flaw with meme coin is basically that it's centralized again, and really there's no connection nor intrinsic value. Or
look, there's much worse than that. So.
Okay. And sorry. By the way, one other thing I want to mention, just to get some more information regarding that particular question. You had mentioned how the U.S. government is unfortunately buying into the meme coin concept, and why this is back to the same old digital version of something centralized. So
yeah, so they're much worse than that. So let's start in reverse. What's the U.S. government doing? Nothing at the moment in time. What is concerning is that there was a Trump coin that the day of I think it went out on the 18th or 19th at the ball the night before. The night before there were two, and all the insiders made a ton of money out of it. They told everybody to get into it, and all this money steamed into this thing. It went up into the billions, and so the people who got the first memes, the first instruments, could then sell them to the people who were rushing in going, oh, this is going to go to the moon, which is the favorite expression of the crypto crowd. Then all the money got sucked back out again to the people who had been on the insiders. I mean, this is insider trading. This is what this in old school financial services where I trained, that's what we used to call it, insider trading, front running. These are things that get you an orange jumpsuit and a date with Bubba. But they get away with it because it's not been properly regulated, it's not been properly done. And so I look at the people who've supported the Trump administration to get where it is. Why was Jeff Bezos, who is the ultimate corporatist, standing on stage behind Trump at his inauguration? That's a point of concern. Because Amazon profiteered from the COVID lockdowns more than anybody else. They wiped out every mom and pop business around the country, but they got massive increase in their profitability because all of a sudden everybody was ordering everything from Amazon, Uber Eats, etc. All the same thing, right? All destroying, all profiteering from small businesses and taking the bulk of the money out of the system. Did not like that. But look at who else has been behind it. Michael Saylor. Michael Saylor's whole thing is about number go up on Bitcoin. He was the one who was pushing the argument that the US Fed must now print $1 trillion in order to buy Bitcoin, create all this more debt. Why, Michael? Oh, so you can become a true Shanghai billionaire whilst everyone else becomes a Shanghai pauper. Such a wonderful individual. And that's what all these agendas are. Coinbase. Coinbase is not a regulated exchange. It's a fake exchange.
Quickly to interrupt you. So I think you hit something there that it definitely resonates, right? So whenever we're hearing about these Bitcoins, meme coins, all these different coins, crypto, you're basically centralizing wealth with whoever the creators are. And
insiders. Just look at it like this. The insiders are making all the money and everybody else is the mark.
So are the insider.
Casino.
With QPQ, you are the insider, more or less. Everyone's the insider. The people are the insiders now.
That's the aim.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Anyway, keep going.
So, look, all of these things are designed. I mean, you said to me something about, would you call it a means of creating wealth? Yes and no. Yes, if you create an alternative economy, your participation in that economy is a means of deriving wealth. But that's not the object here. The object here is to create an alternative economic system that can, in time, if we do this well enough, if people come on board this in big enough numbers, this can actually be the global economy of the future. This is the white paper, the Satoshi Nakamoto's white paper, the Bitcoin white paper, was called a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. We have a slight nerd joke that the whole team are nerds. We're a little bit autistic, and either you're an economics and technical nerd, or you're a technical nerd, or you're an economics nerd if you're in the team. I'm more on the economic nerd end, not that technical. But there's a book by Daniel Graeber called The Story of Money, 5,000 Years of Debt. And the argument is essentially the counter-argument to J.P. Morgan's testimony to Congress in 1912 about what money was and what money is. And so Graeber and the modern monetary theorists pose the idea that it's just debt. It's a promise to pay. And it's okay when we have $39 trillion of debt because we're the US government and who cares? We can tax, what that basically says is we can tax the American people into the ground to pay that back if we need to. Nonsense. But anyway, that's a whole other day's topic. So we tagline the Gajumaru at the DC event. We said that the Gaju is the Gajumaru and Gaju, the currency, is the interplanetary peer-to-peer electronic cash system for the next 5,000 years or more. Why interplanetary? Because thanks to Elon Musk, we are about to go interplanetary. We are about to have actual bases on the moon, bases on Mars. If we're going to do that, we're going to need to have real money that really works, i.e. the Gaju. Coming back to the question of what is crypto? Crypto is basically gambling. That's what it is. And as with gambling, the house always wins. The insiders always win. The people who are the crypto bros. I joke and I say, so if Bitcoin was the peer-to-peer electronic cash settlement or cash system, what they want to have is a peer-to-crypto bro to peer cash, electronic cash system. They're constantly trying to not to realize the vision that blockchain offered, that Satoshi Nakamoto offered, of a new economic system in which we can all participate fairly without anybody owning the system. They want to reinstitute who owns it. They just want to change who owns it. They want to take it away from the existing corporatist operators and put it in the hands of a new set of corporatist operators. That isn't the way this is meant to be.
Okay, this is definitely making a lot more sense. Now, I mean, how do we address for people that are just, I mean, this might seem too complicated. What is the simplest way of, like, again, I'm going to pull out my notebook here because we're vibing here, by the way. This is a very unique episode. This is like a brainstorming session, but for viewers out there that have never done this sort of thing where you're trying to figure out I mean, I've been doing this for 30 years. You're trying to figure out the messaging. It's kind of like you draft it, you draft it, you draft it. It's like writing a screenplay. Your first draft, you write the screenplay. Best thing to do is throw it out the window. You know what I mean? Unless you're like, just exceptionally talented, top 0.1 percentile of writers. Usually it takes a little bit of grinding to figure it out, right? The economic emancipation of humanity, right? You're decentralizing the currency. You're taking away power from essentially these billionaires or people that are trying to be billionaires that are going to see the most benefit because like stocks, if you get pole position on stocks and you get to buy them before everybody else, and we've seen this sort of thing happen. How many of you have gone out there and said, okay, I want to buy this stock, then realized, well, that's unavailable for you. That's for a little private click, Let's keep talking and vibing about this. I mean, how do we explain this in its most simplest fashion to the people out there?
All right, so you touched on something there. It's about access, right? So a lot of the regulation we have around these things is very patrician. It assumes that people are too stupid if they don't have money to be able to figure out what they should or should not invest in, which goes back to something we touched on a little bit earlier. I said that we are the inefficient cogs in someone else's machine. Our education system reinforces that, actually. Our education system is about making us into mildly less inefficient cogs in someone else's machine. Our education system is not about turning us into good citizens. It's not about turning us into discerning actors who can evaluate different sources of information and work out what we think is true. That's not what our system teaches us. Probably the only subject that comes close to that in everyday schools is history or literature. Everything else is much more about being the inefficient cog in the machine. Mathematics, you could argue, is an exception to that in a different way, but actually there's still very prescribed thinking that goes into the basic mathematics that you do in high school. So everything that we see around us is shaped to take power from us as individuals, as people, right from our education all the way through to what is a job? A job is the minimum amount of money that someone can pay you for the maximum amount of work. It's a very one-sided deal. Firm theory, that's why we have companies, why we have corporate system is based upon the idea that it's hard to triangulate the people you need to work with. It's hard to pay them when you do find them, and it's hard to control what they're doing. Well, guess what? With a blockchain, you can blow that all up. It becomes really easy to do business with people. We actually built a platform on the Gajumara, which we were calling Gigalicious. It's now called Gaju Gigs, gig workers. So you're working as a developer, building like you and I right now. You're working on how to formulate the presentation of something. That's gig work. You don't have a contract with company A or B that pays you the minimum amount possible for the maximum amount of work. You could work for 100 people in a year. If you want to think what direction we can go in, we have a lot of IP in QPQ, all of which, as I said, we're licensing to the chain. And 4 years ago, I was very popular on the intellectual property speaker circuit because I was, so they thought, trying to reiterate their argument that we should all have IP, regularized IP. And not only did I disagree with this up on stage one day, I also turned around and said, every single person in this room who's currently under 25 years of age, by the time you're 50, you and everybody else in the industry will sell hours of your time on an open, transparent market in exchange for money, for value. And the better you are at what you do, the more you'll be paid for that hour. And you might only actually work 20 to 30 hours a week, but you'll be better paid than you are today in relative terms. You will have more wealth than you do today because you will get all of the value of your work. There isn't going to be somebody in between taxing it because they collated the direction of travel for that work to come to you. It can happen in an open marketplace. So in truth, the ability to offer our services, our goods, etc., in an open, transparent market with the minimum of friction, and when I say friction, I mean speed, efficacy, cost, taxation upon our labor. The more you minimize that, the more you return that value back to the person, and the more you change the game. So everything in our system now is slanted toward taking power and agency and value away from the individual and concentrating it in the hands of a relatively small number of people. That isn't capitalism. Capitalism, remember, is I win, you win, we win. It's the tide that raises all boats, not the one that only raises some boats and keeps everyone else in the mud.
I mean, that's why I kept bringing up LaRouche earlier in part one, which is that American stuff. I'm noticing there's a clear distinction between, all things British, City of London, and what we've aspired to be an American style of economy, which has been kind of lost. We're in this City of London system that clearly is not working anymore, especially with the kind of debt we're talking about, right? So let's break it down again. I apologize if we're going through arenas that we've already talked about, but I think we just got to really simplify this, right? So as somebody that's watching this and says, well, you know what, that sounds kind of interesting, I'd like to take a stab at it. What are they doing? What are the actionable steps that they're doing to become a part of this?
So one, it's not the case right now because we're still doing all the build to get this up and running by the end of March.
Sorry. To that question there. So, end of March is when people will be able to start onboarding.
Yep.
Okay.
So we'll have the website is gajumining.com. You'll be able to go there. You'll be able to buy a membership package, to a membership bundle, to install the software, do all the things you need to do, get a wallet, the Gaju wallet, as we were discussing earlier. You can do all of those things, and you'll interact with the marketplace. All of that should be good to go for the first people coming on board by the end of March. From there, we want people to start thinking about, well, what would you like to build? If you were thinking about this and you thought, okay, so we're creating a whole new alternative economy, which may, in fact, 5 to 25 years' time, depending upon how fast this grabs people's imagination, may actually become the cornerstone of the global economy. If you could start again, if you had a whole new economic canvas, to like this wall, to start again from scratch, what's the first thing you would build? We built a marketplace. We built a thing for making payments in stores, physical stores. We built a means for people to be able to offer their services in a gig economy. So developers and programmers and UX people, storytellers can sell their services in this context, and it can eventually become sort of a decentralized payroll approach. We've built things like that. But we're a small team. We're not that well resourced, in truth. So what about all the other things you could build? Start building them. Simple as that. So that's the other thing people can do. They can start to trade their goods and services. I mean, we do this demo on.
Sorry to interrupt you. Sorry. So I want to make sure I'm understanding this and the viewers understand this. So, step one. End of March comes, they buy into the software package. Now they have a computer that while they're out working and running around and having a good time, this thing's mining, right?
Yep.
And because it's mining, it's building value. Then you're using the value that it's building. Let's say you're like, hey, we're building value here. I sell sunglasses. You could set up a sunglass store and use that value that's being built to trade sunglasses.
Yep, 100%. So,
how do you value where it's at though? Like, I mean, if it just starts off, like Bitcoin,
we don't.
When it started, huh?
We don't. You see, the thing of it is, we don't have any ability to force people to put a price on this. When I say price, I mean to think of the Gaju as $1, for example. So if you watch I was talking about the marketplace demo. We used to call it quid pro quo. Now it's going to be called Gaju Markets. GajuMarkets.com. You go there. You can sell whatever you want, goods and services. It's all in Gajus though. So in the walkthrough, the lady in Bolivia sells goat soap to the gentleman in Australia, and she sells the goat soap for $22.95, and it costs her 10 gajus to ship it to the guy in Australia. So the total price in the end is $32.95 that the guy in Australia pays to the lady in Bolivia. There's actually an even older demo on YouTube, on the YouTube channel. And people thought we faked it because it all happened so fast. It happened in 3 seconds or less, that all of the transaction occurred between a guy in Japan and another guy in Sweden. In that marketplace, you see all of these things operating and happening. And so you could go in there and you could say, okay, I'm going to sell. How did eBay first get going? The way it worked was people didn't mind the fact that they were being charged 30 to 40% of what they sold by eBay and PayPal collectively, because it was the old piano gathering dust in your garage. It was the statue of a prancing elephant. And so when you put those things up on your local notice board for sale or on a yard sale, the audience to buy them simply didn't walk past your door. If you could put them on eBay, you create a global marketplace where the whole world can look at this and go, oh, I particularly love your prancing elephant, and I will give you $100 for it, only 60 of which you will see. You didn't mind the $40 tax on that transaction because nobody else was going to buy your prancing elephant statue. Similar sort of idea. So if we could get people selling all of their secondhand goods on this, except we don't intermediate. We moderate so people don't sell children on it, for example, but we don't intermediate. And I should separate this out.
So,
PPQ as a company.
Quick question. So
Yeah.
I apologize. I apologize, but I want to kind of make sure we're getting this. So, like in the beginning, it's kind of like very much eBay, like as people are trying it out and making sure that this it's a stable situation. They could enter it by getting trading items that are not necessarily huge ticket items, seeing how
So I just want to make a very clear distinction. The Gajumaru is the blockchain that is completely going to be open source, totally free to everybody. Again, everybody can use it. Nobody will own it. Nobody will control it. The more we can get different people in mining that, the better. The more robust, the stronger, etc. That's part A. As a company, we didn't just do this because this has been our life work and calling. We also have to make money out of doing this. So how do we make money out of it? There's 2 ways. Number one is just like AWS, Amazon Web Services, is the most profitable part of Amazon. What do? They take Apache database systems, which is an open source means of creating databases, and they turn it into cloud infrastructure, which they then sell to people. So our view is we are the experts in how to build infrastructure on a blockchain. So when the US Fed comes along and says, actually, we'd really like to have a national payment system, could you build it? Yes, we can. We probably won't do the implementation because we never want to get as big as, say, Deloitte or one of these big consultancy companies who've got tens of thousands of employees to do the implementations. But we'll do the intellectual work that says this is how you build that infrastructure, this is how it should work, these are the modules, and this is the bit that we'll support for you. That's a very profitable business for us. Open source is free, expertise is not. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to build platforms. Now, platforms don't have to be open. And anything above the resource layer, remember I talked about resource, infrastructure, platform, application. So you can build platforms directly onto the resource layer if you want. You don't have to have the infrastructure in between them. And that's what quid pro quo is. That's what Gaju Pay is. That's what Gaju Gig is. They're all platforms that we've built directly onto Groot, the core resource layer at the bottom. We own those platforms and we will monetize them in exactly the same way as everyone else. And actually, we're being pretty cruel about it because we're making the charge that we put on transactions on quid pro quo, or what is going to be called Gaju markets, so small that unless somebody is willing to compete with us at commoditized values, points of a percentage point, they're not going to be able to run a competitive business. You might argue that's anti-competitive. I'd argue that's very competitive, because rather than gouge people at the start and gradually reduce our fees later, we're just going to go straight to the bottom and say, no, we're going to charge this teeny tiny fee. What does the fee cover? It covers us providing the servers that run the system. It covers us providing the moderation that means that people aren't selling kids on the marketplace. So we have to differentiate. This is the Gajimaro. These are businesses that we will run on this. And everybody else can do the same thing, by the way, because this is open. We don't own or control this. So everyone else can do exactly the same thing. And that's what I'm inviting people to do. Come and build stuff. Build it really well. Build it better than us.
And sorry, on the Gaju, I was just doing a search. That's actually on Coinbase right now, right? Gaju's on Coinbase. Am I looking at the right thing?
Not that I know of.
Okay. All right. So Gaju is based on what, though? This is Swiss currency?
No. The Gaju is the same as Bitcoin. So Bitcoin,
Okay.
Bitcoin, the innovation of Bitcoin was the bit about saying that in the past we created real money as a function of gold. And what was gold? Gold is a finite resource in the galaxy on our planet that it takes risk and effort to mine. Once you've mined it, it's very obvious that it's gold. It's easy to test. It's mellable. It's fungible. The innovation of Bitcoin was to say you could do the same thing with a cryptographic puzzle, which you can. The logic is absolutely sound. We've done the same thing. We created a version of Bitcoin that is tens of thousands of times more efficient than the original. That means it actually works. So we say it's an actual blockchain that actually works, minting real money that really works. So by inviting millions of people to come in and mine before we open it up to big commercial mining operations, we're actually trying to get massive decentralization as early as possible. And we're trying to create a system in which people can begin to create this alternative economy. We want them to build platforms and applications for people to use. The faster and more that people do this, the bigger and better the whole thing becomes for everybody, and the more of an alternative it becomes. So how do you begin to change the economic system? You don't suddenly click your fingers or tap your heels together a la Dorothy and get to the magical place you want to be. You have to think about it in very practical steps. So how do we get people to first begin to engage in an alternative economy? We get them to mine. Now people have got the currency. Great. What do they do with it? Well, how about you buy something on quid pro quo or a different service that somebody else has built? People could build a music playing service, a video streaming service. One of the big things that actually people need to grasp about owning your own data. So right now, in order to get free things like YouTube, Google Search, Google Maps, etc., email, we give up all of our personal data. Actually, the cost of doing a search, it does exist. It's tiny, tiny, tiny value. But what if the way that we work at the moment, because a penny is far more than the cost of doing a search, you'd have to, let's say, just for example's sake, do 1,000 searches before it costs you a penny. But if, as we have with the Gaju, you have 18 places after the dot, 18 decimals below that, actually you could have something that costs you 1/100,000th of a cent to do, like which restaurant is near me with a higher than 4.5 rating that serves Indian food. And that's kind of the thing that this economy also requires. It requires people to value their own data themselves, who they are, and not give that data away for free, and instead say, okay, well, I want to do a search for where's the best Indian restaurant near me. How do I do that? I pay 1/100th of a cent in order to get that answer given to me by the search engine. And this is the point. In the Web 2, or we don't like the phrase Web 2, Web 3, but it's what the world uses. In a Web 2 context, you are the product. Everything seems to be free because you're the product. In a Web 3 context, and let's ignore a lot of the hype and nonsense and NFTs and meme coins that tends to come with, and think what it might mean in a practical, real sense. it means that you will pay for value where you find it. And this is where the ideas of utility coins came out of. A little bit like you go to a fairground, and rather than pay dollars for each of the rides, you will hand over $50 at the door and you'll get 100 tokens, one for each ride. Similar sort of idea. Coming back to the marketplace, how do people engage in it? So take the example of the prancing elephant statue that you think is great, but your wife hates. And for the sake of staying married, you're going to sell. But you can't sell in the yard sale because nobody else on your street really wants a big prancing elephant statue. But actually, there's a person over in Dijon in France who thinks it's the most wonderful thing he's ever seen. And he can see it because it's on an open marketplace that's open to the whole world, just like eBay was. And so you sell your elephant for 100 gajus. Now, you ask the question, what's a gaju worth? It's worth whatever the market as a whole thinks it's worth. I mean, we're saying, when we create that demo, we're saying it's probably $1, 1 Swiss franc, approximately. Hence, the lady sells the goat soap for $22.95, and the guy pays an extra 10 gajus to have it shipped to him from Bolivia in Australia. That's probably quite equivalent to $1 or Swiss franc in that context. But ultimately, the market itself will decide. Now, we really don't want people to do what they did with Bitcoin and start hodling, as they call it, holding on to it and hope that it's going to go up forever and ever. So actually, we're going to work very hard to try and keep it in a range. We know it will go up in value relative to other currencies over time through utilization. But we're not telling people how that's going to happen, when that's going to happen, because we don't know either. This is all going to be driven by what people in the world as a whole do. The more people we get mining, the more people we have using this economy, the more alternative economy exists, the more you'll see a real value. I mean, what's a dollar worth versus a Swiss franc versus a pound versus a yen? It's all decided by huge numbers of market transactions and a coalescence around a range of pricing. That's what we intend to see happen with the gaju. It is intended to be a currency. It's real money that really works. So we want people to decide what it's worth. What's it worth to them? What's the elephant worth to you? And eventually, it's not going to happen immediately, but in the next year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, you'll see an ever greater sense of certainty around a coalescence of price, and that price will start to fall within a channel, and that relativity between fiat currencies, the dollar, the yen, the euro, etc., and the gaju will begin to emerge. Some countries may actually adopt the gaju completely. We saw that with El Salvador. They tried to adopt Bitcoin, but as per my example earlier, you can't transact in Bitcoin. You can do it via intermediation, but then it's still expensive, slow, and you're having to trust somebody who actually isn't very trustworthy. So the gaju would change that. The gajumara would change that. So if El Salvador wanted to adopt a digital currency tomorrow and remove the central bank from the equation, remove the ability to print money and move to a real money economy, they could do that with the gajumara. All they need to do, instead of giving everybody a few Bitcoin, every citizen in El Salvador, I think, got $100 worth of Bitcoin in their wallet or something like that. Well, don't do that. Do a bulk deal to have everybody in El Salvador buy a software package, and we'll put together all the pieces in the background so they can mine gajus. Hey presto, job done. They've got wallets, they've got gajus, they can transact with one another. And look, the reality is, I'm not one of those people who says that there will be no US dollar, there will be no pound. Well, actually, there probably won't be a pound if they keep going the direction they're going in. Same with the euro. You're probably going to see the reemergence of the Deutschmark and the French franc, for example, because the euro is a failed experiment, and the EU SSR is not going to hold together for an awful lot longer. But the US dollar, it will continue to be a currency. I think a lot of what you're seeing with the Doge cuts and the drive from the Trump administration is actually going to end up probably in rebasing the dollar in a different way. And look, it's not for me to say what's going to be the reserve currency of the world in 100 years' time. None of us know that. But I would make an argument that the Gaju will be there or thereabouts. And that's how. So the more people use it, you know that story about the little Indian boy says to the Indian chief that there are two wolves fighting in his soul. One is good, one is bad. Which one wins? And the chief says, whichever one you feed.
So
It's that.
that's actually my next thing. So the success of this is all based upon this going viral. Like if people adopt this, it becomes a reality. Versus a gazillionaire creates something, or they create something, they become gazillionaires, and we get the trickle down effect. So people have ownership.
Trickle down economics should be shot in the foot the minute you hear those words. You want to read the best takedown of trickle down economics and the whole argument around it. It's actually by Thomas Sowell. It doesn't exist. It's a nonsense that was created by the socialist corporatist machine as a pretense. But your question is, I think, forgive me if I'm rephrasing your question.
No, rephrase.
What we've seen to date has been billionaires trying to become. There was a joke in the First World War about done in Blackadder Goes Forth about how there's going to be a big push today in order to move General Haig's drinks cabinet 2 inches closer to Berlin, which will only cost 16,000 lives. It's a similar sort of thing, and why I found Jeff Bezos's presence on the inauguration VIP committee, as it were, so offensive, because in order to get him a 7-foot extension to his 700-foot yacht, basically Amazon, through the COVID era, extinguished every mom and pop business in America and Britain and Europe. And so a guy worth hundreds of billions became worth $1 trillion. Bravo. What have we achieved here? I actually had this, again, my then 10-year-old son is a great sort of voice of conscience for me. He came to one day when we were in Switzerland. He was going to this school in Switzerland, and one of the kids there was extraordinarily rich. And we all love cars. I mean, my father was an engineer. Rachel, my wife's father's an engineer. Our kids love engineering. I love engineering, total geek for it. And he came in and said, look, Dad, there's this new Ferrari. Have you ever heard of it? And I said, no, never heard of it. It doesn't exist. I think someone's just pulling your leg. And he came another day and he had a picture of said Ferrari. And I looked it up on Auto, I forget, it's not Auto Trader, it's Autocar, the oldest car magazine in the world. Went onto their website, and sure enough, this one-off Ferrari made for a collector in Switzerland did exist. And my son's next question was, do you think you'll ever be able to afford one of those? And I said, no, probably, possibly, could afford it, but I'd never buy that. I mean, why would you want to buy something that you just look at every now and then and show off in? There's far better things you can do with that kind of money than that. So then the next question out of his mouth was, well, Dad, if everything works for what you're doing, will you be as rich as Elon Musk? And I said, no, not a chance. And he said, why? Is what you're doing not as good as what he's done? And I said, no, what I'm doing is literally trying to change the course of humanity's economic future. I'm trying to restore agency to the individual. I'm trying to give everybody a chance again, to give everybody hope, because right now we've stripped it out of everybody. You want to know why there's a drug and fentanyl crisis? We hoovered hope out of the system, and then we wonder why people give up. So I said, no, I can never be that rich, because in order for us to succeed, we have to give it all away to the world. We have to let everybody have it. Nobody can own what we're building. Yes, I will make a lot of money along the way, but I will never corner the market. I will never own everything in the same way. Does that mean Elon Musk is a bad guy? No, he happened to be the guy who played the corporatist game better than most. But ultimately, what did he do with his money? He's done a lot of good with his money. He's done a lot of things that will pay off for him, but have also paid off for the rest of us. We now have a social media platform where we can exchange points of view that are meaningful. You know, October 8th, not October 7th, October 8th was the end of me pretending that my politics and my work are not one and the same. You know, as I tell people, if you want to understand QPQ, understand this, that its builders are libertarian, capitalist Christians, and you'll understand everything else. We actually believe in those things. So October 8th, what shocked me, what happened on October 7th was shocking. It was appalling. What happened on October 8th was that hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets of Europe and America cheering the deaths of Jews and demanding that all of those between the river and the sea, not that most of them even know which river or sea they're pointing at, be exterminated. And at that point, I realized that we are in an existential fight for the survival of our civilization, and I could no longer hide what I have to say. But the only place where I can say those things is on Twitter. If I say them on Facebook, it gets deleted. Most of your videos have been deleted from YouTube. Why? Because you're saying things that that system doesn't agree with, and ultimately they pretend they're not a publisher, but they are. They are a publisher because they do decide what gets to go on their website, on their platform. And they do it to an editorial extent. Now, Twitter removed most of that. I know there are people who are arguing that it still has editorial aspects to it, but as an open town square, it's as near as we've gotten. That cost him $40 billion. He's working his way to get us onto Mars. Is he going to profiteer from that? Yeah, 100%. If I were Elon Musk, if I were thinking what he's trying to think and how he's trying to do, is he doing this for the betterment of humanity? A little bit, yeah. Is he trying to find a way of mining the asteroids that zip around our solar system and be able to completely change the entire game in terms of resources and delivery of those resources to the Earth? Yeah, that's where he's really going to make money bigly, as Mr. Trump would say. But ultimately, do I begrudge him any of that? No. I'm just saying this. For what we set out to do, we're never going to end up being in that same rarefied state that he is. Will we be very rich? Sure we will, because we're mining cashews right now. We're trying to get everyone else to come in and do it with us, but we are already mining them. Are we going to build businesses and platforms on top of this? Yeah, we probably have a 6-month to 5-year head start on other people in terms of knowing what needs to be built and how it could be built. We don't have the bandwidth to do it all, not by a long, long stretch. But yeah, we will do very well out of this. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But are we ever going to make the kind of outsized returns that we've seen? No. And the entire system, look, there are many, many things that we can talk about around the COVID crisis, manufactured crisis, the vaccinations or so-called vaccinations. They're not vaccinations. They were injections. Forgive me. I shouldn't misuse the phrase. We can talk about all of those things. But what did they really do? They did what the World Bank and the World Economic Forum really wanted. They crushed small, medium-sized businesses. They crushed family-owned businesses. I talked earlier about what they're doing to farming in the UK with inheritance tax, and they're making it so that farms will end up being owned by corporations. They're breaking our human connection to the land. You know, you read plenty of people saying out there, if you want to be healthy, walk on grass. Connect to the earth. But we're trying to push everybody into pods in cities and to make our lives as impersonal and broken as possible. I was relaying, sorry, this is a diversion point, but where I was staying in DC, I was relaying the story to my family of how post-apocalyptic it actually looked to us in Europe. So if you walk out of my front door here in Ireland or my front door out in Switzerland, you'll see kids walking on the street, kids playing, kids running, jumping in the pool, in the lake. No, sorry, there's no pool here. In the lake over in Switzerland, walking up and down the mountain. In Switzerland, all the kids walk to school or they get the bus by themselves. There's no parents dropping them off at the gates. Zip, zero. If you try it, everyone will tell you that you're completely wrong and should go back to where you came from. What blew me away was I didn't see one child and I walked all over the streets. People thought I was nuts because, you know, where I was, people just don't walk. But I wanted to walk around because there are two aspects to that. One is if you cease to patrol the streets, you give up the streets. And I appreciate it's not my job to patrol the streets, but I kind of like the idea that somebody should actually walk the street and say, no, this is a street. We're human beings. We share this community, this space together. And if we retreat from that, then we end up where you are now. But the other part was I was just really intrigued that, and I know this is not true of all of America. I know that if you go out to Midwest America, to rural America, the community still exists. But there in DC, I didn't see one kid playing in their yard, not on a Saturday, not on a Sunday, not on a weekday evening, not one. I didn't see I didn't see any children playing in the street, nothing. You've literally destroyed communities in this context. And this is what we need to get back to. We need to get back to having high trust society, high trust community. By restoring power to the individual, we also restore power to the communities in which they live. Because then they can decide what they're going to fund, how they're going to fund it, and for whose benefit. Sorry, a little bit of a diversion, but I just couldn't credit how far America has fallen.
I mean, part of this has been the destruction of the family, the same, it all goes down to up to the financial system, because under the financial system, you have the bar, you have destruction of families. I mean, something like 22 million fathers that don't see their kids. You no longer have happy kids. You're not living in a secure society because the masculine role models are taken out. And, obviously there's more fear when, back in the day, 50s, 60s, whatever, your dad wouldn't let you, kids played. And if something, nobody would mess with you because your dad would go kill him. You know what I mean? None of this.
Look, it's not just that. Look, when I was a kid, the light would come in the window and I'd be out the door with the dogs running around the farm. I didn't come back until my grandmother told me that it was lunchtime. I came back and I was straight back out running around the farm with the dogs, and nobody needed to know where I was. It was irrelevant. I was safe. I was in a community. That community, everybody knew each other. The town near where my grandparents' farm was, there's a in your language would be about 500 yards, about 400-meter road, the main high street, the main street, if you like, of the town. And it would take me about half an hour to walk up that street, not because I was crippled, but because everybody I met along the way would, you're Gregory, you're Hannah's boy, aren't you? Yeah, how's your grandma? How's your granddad? Will you tell them I said hi? And then, and so it would go on. The whole way up the street, everybody knew everybody. Everybody knew everybody else's business, and there were plenty of people who don't like that. I get that. But it was a high-trust society such that a 5-year-old boy could walk around it completely safe. In DC, your capital city, within eyeshot of 400 meters away from the national harbor, I saw no children on the streets. I saw signs saying that juveniles, unaccompanied juveniles, are subject to curfew. This is a society that is failing, and you are unbelievably blessed to have the administration that's come in, because if Kamala Harris had gotten in, the light of liberty would have gone off for everybody around the world. That would have been the end. You are once more the shining city on the hill.
Yeah, from your mouth to God's ears. I mean, if you look at Washington, D.C. back in the 80s, while we're going through some of the most prosperous times under Reagan, the murder capital of the country was Washington, D.C. The crack epidemic was rampant in Washington, D.C. So Washington, D.C. has always been problematic because, really, it's indicative of what's happening in America, because even at that time when there's so much wealth, yes, there was a crack epidemic. Yes, there was a violence, murder epidemic all over the place. Washington, D.C. just happened to be the worst. All bad stuff that shouldn't be happening in quote unquote the richest country in the history of civilization.
The richest part of the richest country.
Yeah.
The average wages in DC are $350,000 a year or something stupid like that. There was some ridiculous figure I saw where I think most states, the average GDP, I can't remember the statistics, but essentially Washington, D.C. is incredibly rich next to the rest of the country in terms of income and economic productivity. Probably not economic productivity because it's actually mostly government bodies. But yeah, look, socialism essentially takes the approach that such imbalances of wealth are a bad thing, so they should that we should have the government redistribute wealth and assume that the good government will never abuse that power. Of course, they abuse the hell out of it. Animal Farm, 1984. Route
I'm glad
maps.
you mentioned Animal Farm, by the way. Everybody mentions 1984's apt comparison of what's happening today. But I mean, I see a lot more Animal Farm, honestly.
Animal Farm is what it really is.
Yeah.
The people are Boxer, who was the horse who did all the work, and the fight is between Napoleon and Snowball. Snowball is Lenin, Napoleon is Stalin, and that was the story of Soviet Russia. And you're right, that is it. So, but what does their approach boil down to? It boils down to the idea that in order to reduce inequality, we should take from the successful and give to the less successful through the incredibly poor gearbox of the government. Really bad idea. Capitalism doesn't like imbalances either, but it takes a different approach. It says not that we should have an equality of outcome through the transmission of an incredibly sclerotic and corrupt governmental system. Rather, we should have an equality of opportunity. The problem is we do not have an equality of opportunity. If you go to the school in the district that I was staying in DC, I'm pretty sure you don't have the same educational access or facilities available to you that somebody in a nice part of New York might have, for example. But it's not just about imbalances in educational opportunity. It's across the board. It's things like you've identified. We've made it really easy. I'm anti-abortion. I think it's murder, but I don't think it's a simplistic issue in that sense either, because we've made it really easy for fathers not to be responsible for creating life with a mother. That's wrong. We've taken a huge chunk of the accountability out of the equation that should be restored to it.
I would add honestly, and this is the part where it's just, today I got called a misogynist, by the way, while I was at a protest, because after being called a Nazi and a whole bunch of things by these leftists, the whole day I was getting abused. The whole day I was getting discriminated against. And so I posted a video with a couple of these liberal ladies, calling us Nazis, calling us supremacists, this, that. And then I made a joke. I said, somebody said something, oh, these ladies are crazy leftists. And I'm like, I said, at least they don't have dicks. And got called a misogynist for saying that, The reason I bring that up is because I think part of the female accountability of this, and this is a societal thing. Yes, men have certainly, do not do their share. At the same time, in the United States, especially, and the Western world, I mean, there's a problem all across, Britain, Canada, Australia. You have these courts that basically treat, men like a NPC, non-player character in their children's lives and that sort of thing. And the result of that is that you have both sexes now where abortion is a convenience. You have this kind of over-sexualized women that think, based upon these liberal standards, that sleeping around is liberation and all that stuff. Mind you, you check in with those ladies in their 40s after they've had ridiculous body counts, and they all suffer from depression and taking, pharmaceuticals.
No, it's hedonism. So,
Yeah.
we touched on this earlier. If you strip hope out of the people, what do you want them to do? Why do you think people... Do you think people don't know what crack does to them? Do you think that they're too dumb to know what fentanyl does to them? Why do they do these things? They do these things because we took hope from them. That's one. The other thing is we took faith. We took. You don't have to be a Christian or a Buddhist or whatever in order to recognize that there is something special in humanity. We took so much of that away. We took away God effectively and replaced it with the state. That's both 1984 and Animal Farm. But it went deeper than that. Who is God is a path. whether you believe in God or not, all of these things are pathways that people have to explore for themselves. When I talk to my children about faith, I try very hard to keep my faith from them, because I feel that they need to have their own journey toward what their answer is. Whether that answer agrees with me or not is neither here nor there. When they begin to read more and understand more, I'm happy to debate issues with them. But as a father, I'm nervous of telling them the answer, as it were, because I don't think that's a good idea. But what we have is this state where there is no greater purpose to our lives. And I think that's obviously untrue. We know that in our hearts when we look into our own eyes in the mirror. There is something more to us than that which we perceive in the physical realm. If you strip all of those things away, if you tell people that, as the socialist, as the communist system does, dust to dust, the end, you are born and you die, and that's the totality of what your life can ever mean, then why don't you want what doesn't follow from that? What doesn't follow from that is people, the saying that a civilized society is one in which old men plant fig trees that they will never see the fig bloom on. That's true. If you look at where so many of our problems in society today come from, they come from short-termism. They come from people seeking immediate gratification. The delay of gratification is something that we've said you mustn't do because life is short. Seize the day, carpe diem, blah, 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 all these things, and all driven by corporatist people who really want you to buy their crap and fill your house with it because it pays a bigger bonus for them at the end of the year. We've destroyed what used to be, most towns used to have a blacksmith, a shoemaker, a dressmaker, a suit maker. All those skills, we've been killing them off as fast as we can. Why? Who's benefited? Nobody. Nobody really. A very tiny number of people have benefited enormously, but most of us have lost out because those were, I still have tailor-made suits from my 20s, and they're still in perfect good condition. I don't fit in them anymore because I'm a little bit fatter than I used to be, but I have aspirations to one day fit in them. But they're still intact. I have shoes that are older than any of my children because they were made by a cobbler. And yes, they cost me a lot of money back in the day, but I've never had to replace them. I've never had to throw them out. Actually, if you think about it, they've probably cost me £10 for every year that I've had them. That's cheap. Why is it cheap? Because they were really good quality to begin with. Artisanal work, craftsmanship, it's worth paying for. And I appreciate people say, oh, but what about people who can't afford it? Well, they could if we started to pay people better for what they do. Why don't we? Because the corporatist system allows us not to. It allows us to make one lot of people poor so that another lot of people can add 7 feet to their 700-foot yacht. I know that's silly. It's not a 700-foot yacht that they have, but you get my point. It allows somebody to become so very infinitesimally, tinily richer that it's irrelevant, whilst making everybody else poorer. The answer to that is not socialism. It's not redistribution through the incredibly bad transmission of a highly corrupted state. The answer to that is to drop the barriers. Corporatism exists because we create barriers to trade. We create those barriers to trade through regulation. Why? Let's go back to COVID. The only people who could come up with a solution, we were told, were these monolithic pharmaceutical companies. All the people who had other ideas. I met a guy at CPAC, wonderful guy, Scott Miller. I don't know if you know who he is. He was his book is The Most Wanted Man in Washington. He and his family had to flee Washington because he was actually trying to apply science and think about how could he help his patients who were dying of COVID. And he said about actually saving people's lives. But for doing this, he was castigated and criminalized, demonized by the media. Why can't we have people competing with different answers to solve a problem? Why do we need to create such monolithic barriers to entry that nobody can come up with an idea, test it, and take it to market, and allow the market to decide? Earlier, you asked me what the value of a gaju would be, and I said, I don't know. The market will decide. That's what a capitalist will say to every question, by the way. Let the market decide. Do you pay the doctor with a medical certificate from abc.com in Kathmandu, the same as you pay the guy or the woman who qualified as a doctor in Johns Hopkins? I wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
If you know which doctor trained in a proper medical institution and which one did not, do you need to have a medical council to approve that that person's doctor and this person is not? Because that's just a regulatory barrier. Now, all the answers, I'm not the one giving the answers here. If you want to know the giants that I stand on the shoulders of when I say this, it's Hayek, it's Mrs. von Mises, it's Thomas Sowell, probably the greatest economist, along with Milton Friedman of the 21st century. Sorry, the 20th century in Milton Friedman's case. These people make the most brilliant and simple arguments you can find for all of the points I'm making here. All I'm saying is, with the Gajumaru, we have finally created a truly free, open, negotiable space in which we can all operate without fear or favor, because nobody owns it, nobody controls it, but everybody can use it. The environment that what Sowell and Milton Friedman and Hayek talked about has never existed before. It does now. So the opportunity that we offer to people is to create and be part of the creation of a really human economy, one that rewards our work, our endeavor, our risk, and gives us the reward for our work, our endeavor, our risk. I don't know how to turn that into something that becomes an easy hook for people to get. I wish to God I did, because it would just make this so much easier. But
It's a question here. So would it be correct to say, and I know you're going to correct me here towards the end of the sentence, but the first truly decentralized currency is the wrong word, maybe?
yeah, currency and money are not the same thing. So a currency is a fiat money. It's bounded by the realm in which it's accepted. So, for example, I always have fun with the Bitcoiners, because I say, listen, if Bitcoin were a real currency, or real money, forgive me, if it were real money that really worked, you wouldn't price it in dollars. Oh, but it's the default currency. I go, okay, well, nobody in Britain prices a tube ticket in dollars. They price it in pounds. Nobody in France prices a bottle of wine in dollars. They price it in euros. They don't give a shit how many dollars it is. It's irrelevant. So if something is a currency, and it is money, so money is global. Real money is global. That's what the Gaju is. That's what Bitcoin was the precursor to, the writing on the wall for. Currency is bounded by the environment in which it's accepted as such.
And so what would the right word be? The first decentralized money?
No, because that was Bitcoin. It's
Okay.
not. That was the first decentralized real money. It just doesn't really work. Waiting 10 minutes to know that your transaction is going to be confirmed in an hour to 6 hours time, or even 24 hours time, that doesn't work. The fact that it will cost more money than what you're transacting for, that doesn't work. So it's real money that really works. So transactions are confirmed into the system within 3 seconds. A $5 transaction, from a mathematical perspective, is done in 3 seconds. A $5 billion transaction is done complete settlement to a mathematical almost certainty is done in, let's say, 4 minutes. That's faster than anything in human history as a payment rail. It's also real money because it's been mined out of solving a cryptographic puzzle. And as I say, that was the innovation of Satoshi. So it's not to say that it's the first. It's to say, and again, forgive me that I'm paraphrasing, or not paraphrasing, I'm making a kind of a technical and economic nerd joke, but the Bitcoin white paper was a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. We talk about the Gajimaru being the singular peer-to-peer electronic cash system, and the next step version of that is the interplanetary peer-to-peer electronic cash system for the next 5,000 years. An example of this, that one of the guys who's involved, this is very fond of pointing out, he's a historian, economic historian, and he points out that the Byzant, which was the currency of the Byzantine Empire that sort of rooted around much of the Mediterranean, a bushel of wheat stayed exactly the same price in Byzance for the entirety of the Byzantine Empire's existence because there was no money printing. There were only so many Byzants ever created. Therefore, a bushel of wheat stayed, let's say, 2 Byzants. That's what we're trying to get to. So, not the first, but definitely the last. Look, the other side of this, Vem, is to some extent you have to disregard what I would say because I'm being a nerd about it, and I represent 0.00001% of the world who would actually give a damn that statement is entirely correct. I hope that people would appreciate the integrity we have around those kind of things, but I don't know that.
Yeah, I mean, this is really fascinating. Is there anything that we didn't touch upon? I mean, this has been a pretty long interview. Is there anything that we didn't touch upon that's worth mentioning before we wrap this interview up?
If you want to get involved, there's an email thing that people can go to on gajumining.com and gajumarumining.com, because that's what we started doing before we reduced it down to gajumining.com. Get in touch there. Get in touch on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @GregChew14. I'm the same on LinkedIn. We are really praying that when we call Marco to the world, that we will hear Polo back. We have risked everything on this. And I think the journey we've been on has been one that has had a divine hand all the way through it, even in the most painful moments. The team that I'd worked with from 2017 through to 2022 at the first iteration of QPQ over in Ireland, the break from them actually allowed me to find the team I now have that are infinitesimally more capable. But the first team allowed me to shape a lot of the thinking and the thoughts. So all the way along, we've been on this path that has been an incredible one to walk, but now we need millions of other people to walk it with us. This is about building a movement, and we don't have to agree on every single thing. I mean, you might find my views on abortion abhorrent. You may decide that actually you would quite like it if Israel and all of the people in Israel would disappear. We will never agree on those things, but we don't have to. Ultimately, this is not about a solution to all of the political crises around the world. This is a solution to, if you want to solve most of the problems in the world, you need to have equitable access to markets and equitable access to finance. Solve those two things, and you allow people. I mean, why are people getting in dinghies and crossing the Mediterranean? Why are people jumping the wall from Mexico into America? Because they perceive that they have no economic opportunity where they are. Why do they perceive that? Because of protectionist policies. I'm not talking about a globalist agenda that makes the rest of us the subjugates of a very small gilded few. I'm saying that in a global economy, we can all live in our own communities, in our own culture, and actually participate freely and fairly in a global economy. This is meant to be about the elevation of all of humanity. It's not just the ones we like. It's a bit like free speech. Free markets don't discriminate upon your points of view. Free speech is about listening to the people you don't like. Free markets is about giving everybody equal and fair access, unfettered, unfavored. All I can say is we need your help.
Man, that's a call to action right there, you know? So we're going to have all this info on the bottom in our descriptions. We're going to have a much more condensed version of what we're talking about here released soon. I suggest the viewers check in on our platform for future content as well, and we will have a condensed version of this. I mean, this sounds like something that if we could actually coalesce the energies of we the people and have them sign on to this. I mean, you're saying like 10 million. Once 10 million are signed on, which is worldwide, which is not a big number. I mean, this whole system takes on a life of its own.
Right. Look, there's two countervailing forces here. So the mining curve is set. It's not going to change. And what we really don't want to have happen is a really small number of people end up mining everything, because that's terrible. So that's force one. Force two, pushing the other direction, is we really need to finish the work. So we have to get the core built, because that core has got to be good for the next 5,000 years. This is not a Silicon Valley build shit and send it to the market and then fix it later. We have to get this right first time. And that's why we've been doing this. I've been doing this 24 years. The guys in the team are some of the most brilliant people you'll ever meet, both as human beings as intellectual tour de force. I mean, you know the story of Frodo and Frodo's failure. Mm-hmm. You know the story of Frodo's failure? Yeah. And it was that he got to the pit, the Mount Doom, and he couldn't take the ring off and throw it into the fire. And so Gollum comes along and bites his finger off and falls into the vat of doom, and the ring is melted. The power is broken. And we were talking about this in the team. We have very bizarre conversations about all kinds of things, like whether or not the canonical gospel. The last one was whether or not the canonical gospels accurately reflect the Christian faith, or is it better reflected by the Gnostic gospels? And right there, I get it's communicated, because that means I've read the Gnostic gospels. Anyway, I turned around to the team and we were talking about this thing and the failure of Frodo, and I said, actually, no, that for me is proof of God. And bear in mind, J.R. Tolkien was a very religious man and a devout Catholic. I said, at the moment where he was at his weakest, where carrying the ring had almost broken him and destroyed him, such that he didn't have any strength left, God sent Gollum to save him. The fallen creature saves Frodo. And I said to the team, actually, you're my Gollum. Because the people who stole everything in 2022, they actually said their object was that they said that Greg is like Nikola Tesla. He's full of amazing ideas, but he's too idealistic and he'll die in a ditch like an alcoholic. And their object was to break my family and break me and drive me to suicide. They came real close. But, you know, you can't beat the man who refuses to stop putting one foot in front of the other. And that's what I did. And I kept doing that until I was almost consumed with the darkness. And at that point, a guy who didn't join the team but knew everyone else that came into the team later called the EU SSR in a text message in a WhatsApp group. So I had no idea who he was, and I texted him and said, we are going to be friends. Who are you? And he then introduced me to the rest of these guys. And at just the moment that I was almost incapable of taking the next step, my family were back here in Ireland. I live in Switzerland alone. I didn't have 5 children with the most amazing woman in the world because I don't like them. I love them with all my heart. I do what I do because I want to see them and all of their generations and all of the generations to follow to have hope that has otherwise been stolen from them. And this team came into my life, and we negotiated how it would all come together, how it would all work, and we started again from scratch pretty much. But I said, you guys are my Frodo. You're my Gollum, because at just the moment that the darkness almost consumed me, that I felt that all of my work, all of the struggles, all of the sacrifices, everything I'd put my family through was null and void, and actually my purpose on this earth was a joke. A really dark, bad joke. These guys came along and they took the ring and they took it and put it in the fire. And I'm not saying it's been easy since. It hasn't. It's been really hard. Some months we've literally just made payroll with days to spare. I've been fundraising, working, trying to deal with all the legal stuff around the guys who stole all the IP. We have patents around how to share data analytics with privacy at scale. Essentially, it means that you can own your data but still operate in a world in which everybody who's selling you a service, like a mortgage, for example, wants to compare your data against a wider data sets. That's something that we wanted to license to the world for free. We wanted to give it to the world for free. They've turned it into a corporatist thing that they stole everything from. I mean, even ChatGPT thinks that the probability that it's a copy, their product is a copy of the patents, is in the range of 85 to 95%. When I told ChatGPT that the exact same team that worked on the IP are the ones who've built the product that various people have in the corporatist venture capital world have backed very heavily, are the same, it concluded that it was probably a criminal matter. It is. But the guys that have come into this team have come into it with incredibly good hearts. We sort of joke that Dimitar is the biggest hearted person in the team, but actually all of them are. They're all really good people. They're all incredible people. They came into this with all the right intentions. They've held on to them. They've not given in to greed. They've not given in to the baser instincts that could otherwise wrap people up. And, we talk about it at length in those videos about the Garden of Eden on Rumble, the Garden of Eden problem. And we're now at a point where the keys to changing everything are within everybody's grasp. We say this in our deck to, when people want to understand what we are, we say it starts with us, then you, then all of us. And we can all be one another's Gollum, at that last moment when hope is almost extinguished, when your will and power to carry on through all the pain and suffering it's taken you to get to that point, that God, in whatever form you want to think is God, sends something. The fallen creature is sent in to take that burden. And that's what we need. We need to restore hope. We want our kids not to be a generation of addicts, of hedonists. We want them to have better than we had. I mean, our children are the first generation in centuries not to have greater aspirations than their parents did. In fact, they're in completely retrograde because of all the things that we've been doing for the last 50, 60 years. I mean, ever since we decoupled gold from the currencies, it's just been one great big money printing fiasco. We need an alternative, and nobody ever built one before now. This is it. Every time This is a choice we're going to give the world. Every time you do business in the existing system, you're choosing to perpetuate the existing corporatist socialist machine that has turned you into a slave. Every time you choose to do business on the Gajumaru, you are perpetuating a future in which you have a part, where your children have a part, your grandchildren have a part, where the work that you do belongs, the profit from the work that you do, the endeavor that you undertake, the risks that you take, those profits are yours. And that which you choose to give to your community is your choice. That which you choose to give to the state will ask you for permission to tax you, not vice versa. It can be truly a whole new world for us all, and one in which all of us can enjoy being a part, freed, emancipated, truly emancipated.
Awesome, Greg. Awesome. I really appreciate this interview, man. Really, really great information. We will have information below in terms of the websites Greg is talking about. For the viewers out there, thank you for joining us for this double episode of Blood Money. Please make sure you check out AmericaHappens.com for our future episodes. Make sure you check out our Rumble channel, our Roku channel, and I will see you all on the next episode of Blood Money. Thank you.